Thank you. In accordance with board policy, this amount is to advise all attendees that tonight's board meeting is being recorded. Persons wishing to address the board on any agenda or non-agendized item must fill out a speaker card. Do you have any speaker cards at this time? I need a motion to adopt today's agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Ms. Talcott. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, do you want to do a roll call vote?
Oh, yeah.
Board member Lindsay. Aye. Board member Ross.
Aye.
Board member Talcott. Aye. Board member Miyakawa.
Aye.
Board President, aye.
Sorry, Board President Harvey.
Aye. Thank you so much. The motion carries. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Today is a budget study facilities workshop. First on our agenda is Crossroads West School Discussion Presentation. Is that you? Yeah.
Yes, good evening. I think I will just introduce this and probably turn this over to Mr. Robb, who has put together a great, concise summary and decision matrix for a discussion on a future school at Crossroads West and the development that we've been speaking about that is going on over there. So, Mr. Robb.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Would you prefer me to stand and make the presentation to the board or just sit here? How would you like it done?
What's easier for you?
I don't care. I'm fine either way.
Standing there is great.
You want me to stand?
No, just sit. Perfect. Sit.
Okay.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Perfect.
Just use your microphone.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you all. I think tonight is an important night. The reason I have requested it is because being on the board as long as I've been, I always felt that over the past 25 years that we were building schools way too late after we really needed them. There was a period of time when we were building the starting Freedom and then went on to Mary Ann Sanders, to Savage, to Crossroads, and so forth, that the school district was growing exponentially with all the new building. And so we couldn't house the kids. So we ended up basically scattering portables throughout the district to house the kids. And then they were being housed in little rooms that were between other rooms. Anyway, I want to avoid that on this because we are actually getting into the ground out in Crossroads West. In Crossroads West, if you've driven out there, you'll see that they have built the model homes. And so that's a good sign that they're moving forward with actually building. So with that in mind, I thought I would bring to the board a presentation to help us understand how schools are financed and how we might be able to get ahead of the curve rather than 10 years down the road after the kids have all moved in and they're out there and we're spreading portables all over the backside of Crossroads and Stockard Coffee and U-Stack and being a very uncomfortable situation. So with that in mind, let me bring you up to date that here in February, the Crossroads area CFD is going to be organized. The CFA organization for both Crossroads and Tivoli will be organized in February. Think of these organizations, the CFA, basically as a bank that the school district goes to get money to build a school. Schools are funded either through, usually, I'm going to summarize it into 3 areas. They're either built with the funds from a CFD, a CFA fund, we call it Melrose, or they're built with developer fees. So if a development is not a Melrose development, then it falls de facto under developer fees. And if we look at those funds, we notice that they're very limited. They're not to the same level as Melrose. The next one would be if for some reason the state of California felt very generous and was giving money to fund the building of schools. We've learned that that is something not to rely on, and we're going to actually have a discussion item on that just for reimbursement of modernization. So it's not a real good way to fund schools or count on that. The last and final way is where the school district passes a bond rather than the local CFD doing the bonds. And this is where you basically tax everybody in the school district, and that gives you money to build. Now, we have done this as a district to do the modernization projects. We've also done it previously, right when I got on the board, there was a bond that funded the multi-purpose rooms at 5 different elementaries. Those are the ones you're seeing at Sherwood, Stockard Coffee, and those nice boxes out there that we have the kitchen, the cafeterias and so forth. We call them multi-purpose rooms. But we did do bonds to do all our modernization because we knew that the state of California might match us in funds if we came up with our own funds. So that's the reason we did a bond. Right. So I've come up with an alternative, and I'm going to share it with you that the people in that area can fund their school themselves. So if you want, there is this attachment. So I put this attachment together. So if you see misspellings in it, you can blame it on me, not on staff, because they would never allow something to come out of their office with a misspelling, right?
I can't open my
You can't, it's an attachment. It's under item number budget study session, Crossroads West. There's a little paper clip.
And they'll display it. Yep, he's doing it right now.
Okay, and it's on your screen.
There it is.
So what I've done is that the first part of this document is 3 options. I'm going to briefly go over options 1 and 2. Not go into each bullet point because they're not viable options. In my opinion, other people may have a different opinion. All right, so option number 1 is in Crossroads West. We can use that school site to build another elementary school. If we build an elementary school there, the CFD, the CFA, I'm going to use the term CFD, but the Crossroads CFD run by the CFA there has budgeted that that elementary school would be built for $25 million. As a result of that, the CFD would only be able to pay for 15 of the 25 million, meaning that the final 9,779,000 would need to come from an alternative source. Really, the only other alternative source would be a state funding. And that is going to be fairly remote. There is another option, which would be a Hail Mary pass also, which be to be floating a bond over the entire school district. Basically, would it eventually be able to be done? The answer is yes. I'm going to give my educated guess, at least 10 years. It would take at least 10 years to go to get to that level. And that would assume that the state of California had funding to fund new schools. And there's no bet on that, or that we could ever even pass a bond. Remember, it would be a really hard thing to sell to the people who live over in Sherwood or Coleman Brown area to pay for a school out in Crossroads. All right, so with that, I would say probably not a good option. Option number 2 would be to build a middle school out there. That would cost approximately 53 to 54 million. The CFD would fund about 12 million of it, close to 13 million of it. The Crossroads East CFD, it's not actually called that, but it's actually called CFD 1998-1. We would be able to get 25 million from that CFD, but still with those two numbers added together, we would be short $15 million to build a middle school. So once again, we would be left to the alternatives of state funding or throwing a bond out over the entire district. Both would be very difficult to do. Once again, option 2, probably at least a minimum of 10 years, could be longer. Yes, Mrs. Lindsay. Yes, that's what I did.
Microphone.
So
I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry.
So she asked, Mrs. Lindsay asked, could we add the money funded through Crossroads West and Crossroads East? The answer is yes. Those two numbers added together would be about $38 to $39 million. The school cost $53 million, so we would be short $15 million. So the question is, where would we get $15 million? Once again, you would be left up to state funding or a global district bond. Again, very difficult to do, at least 10 years, probably. Again, that's my best estimate. Could it eventually be done? Yes, but a long time from now. So that's option 1 and option 2. Now, what we're here about is to talk about option number 3. In option number 3, it's something that we have not done before. And let me get through the whole presentation before we start formulating, opinions and judgments on this, because this is thinking a little out of the box. It would be to convert Crossroads Elementary, which is currently out there, which is a kindergarten, 5th grade school, to a K-3 elementary school. And in the location of Crossroads West, we would build a new 4-8 combination school in Crossroads West. Now, what this does for us is, again, the cost of the school is still just under $54 million, but it frees up funding sources. And let me show you the following funding sources that it frees up. First of all, it allows us to have access to the elementary funding from Crossroads West, which is a little under 16 million. It allows us to have the middle school funding from Crossroads West, which is 12.7 million. And it also allows us to have the middle school funding from Crossroads East, which is 26 million, for a total of 54.4 million, which is about just a little under $1 million over what we would be able to access from those 3 well, actually 2 CFDs, but funding sources by making it a combination school. Now, now look at how the funds lay out down under the final conclusion. These bullet points are important, so I'm going to go through each one. All the funds to build the school would come from the CFDs and not any state funding. If state funding did come, it would pay the CFDs back earlier and relieve the burden on the local people if we did get state funding. So we would still apply for state funding, but it would go to pay back any bonds that we got off of those CFDs. There's currently about a little over $4.5 million currently in the bank, which could be used for immediate land acquisition. In other words, we could begin the negotiation process for purchasing the land. There is also bonding capability in CFD 1998-1, which is Crossroads East, of 21.56 or $21.6 million, meaning that we could begin the process because that amount of money is available to be bonded for in that CFD. The balance of the $27.6 million would be able to be bonded against as soon as the houses are built in Crossroads West. Now they're starting them now. So how long would it take to build out Crossroads West? You know, I'm shooting from the hip, but I'm thinking maybe 3 years if the economy is, you know, not beat up too bad and interest rates don't go too unusually high. They're going to build houses because we have in Stanislaus County little to no inventory for new houses. We do see the new development that is happening over there on the corner of Carver and Pellendale. Same builders, it's Florsham Homes there. And then they are doing a little bit still out in Village 1. Still, it doesn't even come close to the need that's available in Stanislaus County. So this option would allow for the shortest timeline. My guess, somewhere in the 3-year range. So we could begin by negotiating and buying the appropriate property. We could also begin with the plans, the DSA, and the process. And once we get the full amount in, we can go into the ground. But there's about a 2-year process that we would probably have to go through to get to the point where we would be shovel ready, and then about a year to build the school. So we could possibly have the school ready to go to be inhabited by the end of year 3, possibly 4, which would be in very close proximity to when that housing development was probably, in my estimation, going to be complete. And it would be fully funded by all the people who live in Crossroads East and Crossroads West. So those kids would no longer be bused to USTAC. They would go to the new school, and the school would be, I met with the architect, and he said that the school could be beautifully designed to easily segregate the 4th and 5th and 6th graders from the 7th and 8th graders. With the appropriate design, with some buildings being shared, some buildings not being shared, and their appropriate beautiful barriers and so forth. Meaning, when I say barriers, I'm saying like wrought iron fence rather than chain link fence, and so forth. So it could be a very nice design for that. So that would allow us to get moving on a school at an accelerated rate, rather than probably waiting 10 years before we could probably even start any type of process to go through. So if you go to the next place, implementing insights into building a combination school. Well, Crossroads East Elementary would be probably a school that would house about 800 students. It's less than that now. If you want, on your very last sheet, you will see that Crossroads did get well over 800, but as of today, it's about 750. The combination school would house about 1,000 students. It would probably be designed to handle upwards of 1,200. But as you see, all of our middle schools are somewhere around the 900 range or so. So there would be plenty of growth there. All the students would live in either Crossroads East or Crossroads West. They would be a true local community school. The middle school students that lived in Crossroads East would no longer attend USTAC. In fact, the vast majority of the people who live there would be considered in walking distance based upon our current board policy, which is elementary 1 mile, middle school 2 mile. If that, I'm assuming that policy hasn't changed. There probably would be little or no busing going on out there. It would be all walk to school or drop off. Crossroads West Combination 4-8 School would be uniquely designed in a way to physically separate the 4th through 6th graders from the 7th through 8th graders. Some buildings could be shared and used by both groups at different times, while other buildings could be exclusive to each group. Architectural design and beautification barriers would be used to keep both groups completely separate and not commingled, even if we felt that separate entrances, separate drop-offs, that could all be accomplished with an appropriate design within budget here. So all the steps, if we did this, the steps would be as follows. The board needs to decide which option they would like to go for, option 1, 2, or 3, because we're pretty much limited to those 3. Then the board would go and create a public hearing at Crossroads Elementary from those people who lived in the Crossroads area and get their input. The board would lay out a timeline to complete the school. The board would engage in preliminary design of a new school using existing plans from Crossroads Elementary and Savage Middle School to save costs. We would use the pod design that we have at both of those schools, including Mary Ann Sanders. And the board would engage in negotiations with developers for the purchase of the school site. And the board is, the final bullet is already happening in February, where the board would move forward with developing the Melrose. That's already happening. It's happening at the February 9th meeting. Regardless of option 1, 2, or 3, the last bullet point is a legal thing that has to happen, and it's moving forward, regardless of which option. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get direction of which option do you want to go with, and that will determine which timeline we go and which steps we go in. So I turn it back to the president. I'm happy to answer all the technical questions. I've done a lot of research on the CFDs, the funding, had Dennis get legal advice from the CFD to make sure it was all legal, talked to the architect to make sure that could this even be done? Has it been done, and so forth? So I can answer all those questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Rock, for that very detailed presentation. We'll start with Ms. Lindsay, and then we'll go to Ms. Miyakawa. Ms. Lindsay?
Yes, Mr. Rawl, you mentioned that the CFD is going to be the CFD is going to be for Crossroads, and there's going to be a CFD for Tivoli. Are they separate CFDs?
Yes, they're separate CFDs, but run by one CFA board. Just like the current CFA board runs 3 CFDs, this new CFA board will run 2 CFDs, the Tivoli one and the Crossroads West.
Okay, I take, well, that would be where I would take exception, because I think that the people that would be involved in it should be the people from Tivoli area, you know, that served on that, is at least the community members. And that would be a little bit difficult there if you have only community members.
Okay, so great question. I brought the same question up to Dennis Wolterstorff. First of all, the new board would run Tivoli and Crossroads West. It would be housed by 2. So the current CFA, you and I are the main, that the other 3 are the alternates. On the new CFA board, Jennifer and I are the main, and the other 3 are the alternates. The same with Modesto City Schools. It's a 5-member board, the other one's a 7. As for the community member, we talked about who should we get for a community member. Dwayne Wolterstorff says we can pick anyone we want, they just cannot live in either CFD. Right, because if they did, although I disagree with Mr. Wolterstorff's analysis, I do believe that you can live in the CFD and deal with it. But if you remember at the end, when we were shutting down 1994, myself, Mike Rigo, and one other board member always stepped down because they felt that there's a potential conflict of interest, which I disagree with. But anyway, he's saying the new community member should not live in either one.
Okay, that gives me some peace of mind.
All right.
And then my other question would be then, in the funding, will there be like a separate, where will the kids from Tivoli, where do you propose that the kids from Tivoli will be going? Would they replace the kids from Crossroads that are new staff?
Okay, great point. So let's keep Tivoli completely separate. That we own the elementary site in Tivoli. That would be funded and build with the appropriate funds at that time. It's a separate location, separate school site. We actually own that site, and we would build it under a different plan. In other words, when that got ready to a point where we see houses going in there, I would probably call for another study session and ask you guys, what do you think we should do here? I'd give you options, and then we would move forward with that plan. This is strictly Crossroads West funding only.
I understand that. I guess what my concern is that if you're going to take, I don't know how many kids are in middle school at Crossroads West and Crossroads East that would go to the new middle school that are coming out of USTAC. I don't know what that number would be. So they definitely would be replaced, obviously, by children that are from the Stockbridge, Tivoli community, right?
So in other words,
I'm just trying to get this
Crossroads West will have a 40-some percent, the percentages are here. There's a 40-some percent in Crossroads East, and there's it tells you on option number 3. If someone sees it, you can yell at the numbers earlier. So there's a 43% Crossroads East and 24% Crossroads West, which is a total of 40, 50, 60, about 70% middle school there. That's why I'm recommending a combo. Whereas Tivoli, they would have a little bit of money in there for middle school, but predominantly the need there would be elementary, and they're in very close proximity to USTAC. So what I would recommend, and again, this is another discussion, really another day, once the school is built in Crossroads, if we went with this plan and we moved the couple hundred kids, whatever it is, from USTAC out to their new school, it might be time for us as a district to look at realigning the middle school boundaries and equally sharing them amongst our kids who are here in Modesto.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering the questions.
Ms. Miyakawa?
Thank you, George. That was a really good summary, particularly, I mean, even for those of us who have been on the board for a while, but particularly for those who are trying to wrap their head around how we finance and build schools. So that was very clear. I thought you did a great job with that. And just to jump off what Mrs. Lindsay said, kind of her point with Tivoli kids is, we don't really, we could crunch the numbers now to see how many kids that currently would pull out of USTAC and compare to that to whatever the number is projected for Tivoli, which is starting to move, not as quickly as Crossroads West, but it might be an even swap. We just really don't know at this point. I don't think perhaps we can, project that out, but to see whether what George was saying in terms of a realignment would be necessary, or if it's just going to be an even swap. I did have a follow-up question, kind of had to do with Cindy's comment. And that has to do with the conflict of interest. Maybe you can go over that again, where you said you had to step down when decisions were made because you lived in the CFA district, and that would also pertain to me. I live in Crossroads in CFD 1998.1-1. Is that going to be a conflict having me on that CFA board? You are not. So, and then the Modesto City people wouldn't be. So we're going to be okay if it's just me having to step down and potentially a community member?
Well, you don't have a conflict because you live in Crossroads East, and this is Crossroads West you're sitting on. Crossroads East, Cindy's sitting on. Okay,
so, but we are using funds from Crossroads East to, the funds are already there, right? Because the homes are already built, but those to potentially build the middle school, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, and let me tell you why. Maybe we should rebrand it. It would make a lot more sense to a lot more people. Just think of the CFD as a bank, okay? You sit on the board of directors for the bank Crossroads West. Cindy sits on the board of directors bank Crossroads East. The bank has no say about what kind of school you build. They have no say about how many kids you're going to put, whether it's a K3, a K8, a 3-7, a 5-4. SEPA can say, the bank can say nothing about that. The school board makes that decision. All the bank does is when they have enough taxing assessed value available on the properties, they're able to go out and bond and then keep that money in the bank should the school district need to come in and get the money to actually build the school. So the CFDs can say nothing to us about what we do with the school. All they can determine is about the funding of the school.
So what decision did you say you had to step down from then?
So I live over in CFD 1994-1. It's kind of a unique thing because 1994-1 is Village 1. I actually live just up the street here off of Dragoo, where they built that little swath of houses which border on Claritina, Coffee, McHenry, and on north end of Dragoo. If you've ever driven there, it has a roundabout in it. If you've ever driven that area, if it's in your mind, for some unique reason, they annexed that subdivision into 1994-1. How they were able to do that, I don't know, because we're so far away from 1994-1, but for some unique reason, they did that. And I live in that CFD and pay Melrose tax to 1994-1, although my kids never went to a school in that, Village 1. All right. So for 20 plus years, I have been on those CFD boards and we have been operating just fine. For some reason, when we went to we're going through a process of closing down 1994-1. In other words, everything has been paid. The bonds are being paid off. Everything is being paid. The school districts have all had their money. It's done. It's finished, and it's wrapping up this year. And Dwayne felt for some reason that I might not be able to vote on closing it down, that it might be self-serving for me to sit on a board and close something down. So, because I don't want to pay tax anymore. Well, it's paid off. And so he felt that. And we went through about 6 months where we went through legal. And in his opinion, Mike Rigo, myself, and another person who lived in the CFD had a conflict. So for any issue associated with closing down 1994-1, we've stepped off in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. We have not been involved in any decisions to close that down.
I think it's because
the water's under the bridge. It's already done.
It's done, but in perspective, right, Jennifer, I think it would have looked maybe like, hey, I'm voting to give myself money or quit having to pay for this. I think that was all. I think that was basically, it was just to try to make things look clean and
sure.
Open.
A perception.
It really
thing.
didn't have anything to do with their having anything wrong or anything like that.
Okay, just two other follow-up questions. One, you mentioned your subdivision getting kind of scooped up into 1994-1. Is that new development that I asked you about that you already knew of, but I had just seen it. I'm wondering if that's the one George is saying is Village 1, that one right off of north of Merle and kind of over by Claus. I don't know. Anyway, that division that's building out right now, it's just a small little division. Is that being adopted into any CFD, or is that a developer fee funded division?
No, that's not. No, that's not. They did not want to adopt into any of the existing mitigation agreements or Melrose or anything. Dwayne confirmed that information.
Right.
So tag on to what she's saying, those in the geography of 1994-1, they're not being allowed because the CFD is being closed down, so they're not being allowed to join in. So all of those homes, they'll pay straight developer fees. That's the default. They go straight to developer fees rather than going into the Melrose. And they have to say whether they want to do one or the other, right? You mentioned that developer fees is not in our best interest in terms of how much money we glean from it. but they decide whether they want to do Melrose or, right?
The owner who owns the property developed makes the decision of either to join the CFD or not join. If they choose not to, it defaults to developer fees. If they choose to, then it's more beneficial to us.
Right. And so in Crossroads West, the new one, because that has multiple owners on a property, are they all getting into it? I mean, do we know that far ahead? Because I know only some of the builders are building now.
We know that the vast majority of land, I don't know the exact percentage, but I have been led to believe it's something like in the 70 or 80th percentile, is owned by like one or two people. And so all of those agreed to do it. The smattering of others will likely join us. They can't be forced to join us, but they will likely join us, and they will be encouraged to join us just because it will benefit the families out there and being able to get to schools.
Mm-hmm. And it benefits their children.
Yeah, it benefits the kids.
Okay, so I mean, potentially there could be an issue with our numbers being a little off should they decide not to join. But as far as with the data we have now, that's what we know, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And remember that if we do go lower, let's say that there's a 10-acre parcel and they choose not to, it would default to developer fees. So I would go to Lizette and say, Lizette, carve out the developer fees that are coming from that, make sure that we're going to attribute them out to that area so that they're not lost in a bank account and get mixed in with, because Lizette is getting developer fees from all over the district, not just that CFD.
Right. Okay, last question. Could you explain what it means then, the bonding capacity that we already have because homes are already built? What does that process look like so that we understand as a board, and should taxpayers come to us to, I mean, it's not the same as going out for a bond like you talked about before, right?
So what that means is that in a CFD, you cannot bond on any house until it is fully built, closed out, and purchased. Closes escrow, people move into it, okay? Then you can bond against it, and you are able to bond against it according to its assessed value. So property taxes give you what your assessed value is on your property at the time that it closes escrow. When you purchase it, it becomes an assessed value. And your property taxes are based on it. You pay 1% here on that. Well, that assessed value, all of the properties, we add up all the assessed values out there, and it tells us what our bonding capacity is. Then we're able to go out there as a bank, a CFD, and bond for cash flow purposes only. And we get the money to give to the district to build the school. And then that CFD manages the payback of that bond until it's fully paid off, as they have done in the Village 1 1994-1. It's fully paid off now. We're ready to close it down.
Okay. So
it's
is that
about 30 years is normally it. Sometimes 40, but normally 30.
Is that the assessed value at build, or is that the current assessed value of my home at Crossroads East? Now, we haven't bonded on it yet, right? Because we haven't built the middle school. So
it's your assessed value of your property changes on an annual basis. They're usually, I think, I could be wrong, I think they're allowed to go up 2% on your assessed value on your property on an annual basis. So the assessed value is at the time that we're ready to go out and bond, we will do an analysis of the assessed value at that time. I call it the CFD will do its work, and we will meet as a board as CFD and determine what is our bonding capacity on January 1, 2025. And then we can go out and shop for bonds if they're at a good rate at that time. So we're going to go out onto the market and shop it.
Gotcha. So that was my main question, right? Because I purchased my house in 2004 and it was at this value. Right. 2008, the value was obviously a little bit different. And then now things have climbed back out again. And so that was my question, is have the figures that have been presented this evening are kind of figures based on current assessment values? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that is correct. And I know many of you saw your assessed values drop after 2008. You'll see that a lot of them dropped. But you'll see now that we're up in 2021 or so, most of those have caught themselves back up. You saw a little while where they were just ticking up at 2%, and then all of a sudden they dropped because the housing market collapsed in 2008, and they dropped a lot. Well, when they're down at that and they drop it back down, they can't boost it back up just 2%. They get to go back up to where they were before and build on it before. But they normally don't do it all in 1 year, so they don't paralyze the economy. They normally take 1, 2, 3 years to catch itself up, because you're going, hey, why did my assessed value go up more than 2% this year? I would normally say to you, well, you probably dropped and it's just recovering itself back up to its regular previous level.
Okay, thank you. I feel like I'm in an economics class. Very good. All right, thank you. My question.
It is economics. All right, Ms. Talcott, do you have any questions at this time? Oh, yeah, come on. So I'm still trying to take it all in. My first school building process here. So you're saying that the values that you're basing it on is based on the current market prices of the houses aren't there yet, but that we assume will be there?
Actually, no, the amounts that we're dealing with on these numbers are fixed amounts, and actually these amounts will go up by 4% on an annual basis in the CFD. That's the language in the CFD. What we were talking about previously is just our bonding capacity. It's just, I'm kind of a KISS person, keep it simple type of thing. Just remember this, we can't get our money out of Crossroads West until the houses are built. When the houses are built, we can get the money from Crossroads West. Crossroads East, all the houses are built. So we could go and get the money pretty quick.
That's already
because the houses are already there. Okay. So rather than talking about assessed values, this is kind of like getting in the weeds. Think about, we can't bond until there's actually a physical structure there that will ensure and protect the bond.
Okay, so gleaning from the other knowledge I have, like the Catholic Church, when they build a church, they have to have all of their money there before they break ground.
Yeah.
Is that is not the case for this?
That is the case. We need to pretty close to know what. All I'm trying to do is tell you, one, we do have money in place that we could get the land and get going on the planning, but you're right. We would not go into the ground with any shovels until we had the money, until Lizette told us, yep, we got all the money in the bank, we're ready to build. But yeah, we would not build unless we had the money in the account to build.
Okay, and then the next question is, what happens if there's a surplus of money? I know that's probably a pipe dream, but.
So we are only allowed, so if you look under option 3, we are only allowed as a school district to spend $53,700,000 on that school. Any money we spend over that amount, we're going to have to, as a district, come up with the money for that. And that's just going into different accounts, capital facility, that's up to us. But the CFD will only give us a maximum of 53.7. Now, I will tell you, every 12 months, that number goes up by 4%.
And then your option 1 was 24-ish million, and the option 2 and option 3 were 53 because of the middle school aspect.
Right. So the first option 1 was an elementary school, which wouldn't really be a need, but I wanted to put it on here so you guys have a clear picture of all the options. What there's going to be a need for is a middle school. And so a middle schools cost twice as much, and they eat up more land too.
Bigger bodies, yeah. Okay, I
Yeah.
think that's all of my questions I can glean right now. Oh, Ms. Lindsay, you had an additional question? I do. I have one more, and then hopefully that will cover it. Okay, but first of all, I don't like calling it Crossroads West because I don't want the community to think that's what we're going to call it. I mean, we have a school process of naming a school, so we don't want you people to think we're naming it Crossroads West, but we're saying it's in the west part of Crossroads area. My question is probably more for Lizette. Lizette, when I look at the design and the plan, right now we're only building out half of the property from Oakdale to Coffee Road, and the other half, is there any perspective on when that would be built out? And in doing so, are we planning in one of this third plan, would that accommodate the children that would be coming out of that development? Because that would mean a whole bunch more kids coming into those schools, and then are we robbing? What is it, stealing from Peter to play Paul or something like that? You know what I mean? I don't want to take away from the kids that would be coming out of that development.
They were not commingling at all. That's my whole purpose, is not commingling.
So that when it's split, it
Would be a whole new SEPA on the other side.
It is.
So what would it be called?
He hasn't named it yet.
But there's a
Did they name it? We haven't named the CFD in Tivoli yet.
We
No,
haven't
I'm
named
not
the
talking about
CFD.
Tivoli. I'm not talking about Tivoli.
Where are you talking
I'm
about?
talking about the land in up around Riverbank where when Oakdale Road and Coffee Road, between those, when I looked at the design of the layout, it's about half of the property of the land in that area. About this, what is it, a square mile approximately, and it's about half of it.
Yeah.
And we're building a school to accommodate those children, plus some from the other side of the Oakdale Road. What will happen when we build out that other half of the school area? Where will we put those children? Will we have to come back and either build another elementary? Will we have to decide that that's not a good design and put all the elementaries in that one school? I'm just a little concerned that we'll have room for all of them, and we won't have the money because we will take them from Crossroads East, quote, quote, and from the current Crossroads area to build a school. And where will we send those children? Will we be I don't want to leave Sylvan in the process of saying we've got to build another school somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And so I guess what I'm trying to do is say, I don't have a problem. I just want to know where those kids are going to go.
I can answer. You want to answer?
No, but I was gonna say, you can chime in. I mean.
Okay, so Cindy, Dwayne has this thing about if more than 12 months pass, it has to be a new CFD. So I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about that part that's not developed on the other side. It would be its own CFD. It would be its own funding, and it would probably have another school over there.
But if we can't afford to build one on this side of it, how is Sylvan going to be able to afford to build it on the other side? That's going to be, I just don't.
It may be huge. We just don't know the size of it. It could be big enough to fund, but
I guess I'm just looking down the road, and I don't want to make Sylvan. When we're all gone, this board's gone, and everybody in this audience gone. I don't want Sylvan to be going, what the heck were they thinking? Where are these kids going to go to school? So I guess I'm just trying to figure out.
it would have its own funding.
It would have its own funding. Would we have money, if we had money left over in this one, like Holly said, would that money be able to roll over to that CFD?
Only the amounts that are listed in the CFD. So I'll give you a classic example. This scenario exactly happened. When we built, I'm just going to call it, just be patient with me, Crossroads East and West, because it's easier in our minds.
Just don't listen to that part.
In Crossroads East, we only had enough money to build 40% of a middle school, which is not enough to do anything with. Let me just confirm, 43%. There's not enough money to build a middle school. So what did the Sylvan School District do? We made a decision to strategically put our Crossroads kids at USTAC. So we housed them there. But now, up and coming is an opportunity, an opportunity is coming where all those kids can stay in Riverbank by us combining. My guess is, and I don't know if this is true because I'm just making this up, there may be, I don't know what percentage we're going to get from the other property because the middle school would only be funded for 75%. So it could still have room for another 25. So then that may be in the future be converted, that school. So, but it would have its own funding source when it was deemed appropriate to do. So it's not going to be an unfunded swath of land out there. It will be
it's not like Village One.
No.
You cover everything
No.
in the whole.
It would have its own CFD. Just like Dwayne would not allow us to merge Crossroads East and West into one CFD, they have to remain separate CFD. I'm sorry about that. I'm having problems with my hands. They're kept separate. The funding sources are completely separate. And that's important to the taxpayers there, that they don't end up, the people who got in late pay very little taxes. The people who've been in there the longest have been paying for 20 years. And those who just had a house built this year, they're paying for 1 year, you know, so they would have its own funding source.
That makes me feel better. And then I guess my other question would be, not really a question. I'm not advocating for anything, but I can tell you that in my position in the state level, I have been to schools that have K-8s, and I have been to schools that are broken down like this, and they can function, they can work. The kids don't even see each other if you do it correctly. They're campuses within campuses. I guess, like I said, my only concern would be that that other half, unless we see potential growth anywhere else, that seems to be the last bit of land that I see going anytime in the future. And besides Tivoli, that we would be building on. So that worries me a little bit about what position we're leaving Sylvan in, as far as being able to house those kids. But that if you have any way of figuring out what a guesstimate they might have that might the number. I mean, if we're getting how many kids out of the sides right now, if we're going down the middle, how many kids are we getting? Yes.
So yeah, I believe it. Is it on one of the streets? Was that the generation rate?
Yes,
So,
I think it was.
Why don't you take her to that page? One of the pages, I think it's the one that looks like this. It shows the generation rates, I think, on it.
Actually, this is for the homes, not necessarily the students.
No, I know. I'm just saying, would it be about approximately the same? And if it is, and we haven't got the money, we don't have the money for the middle, this portion, or I call the right side, or the east side of the property. We don't have the money to build it right now. What will we do for the other side? That worries me a little bit. And I guess I would want to lean toward building, if we could, you know, if we look down the road to building that school so it could become an elementary, and then possibly put a middle school in that other development when it comes, or vice versa. And you build it as a middle school and then flip it over and only have to build an elementary.
Ability and flexibility.
Yeah.
The flexibility to be able to do that.
And we also know education is going to change a lot.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple quick questions that I was hoping to get in.
Yes.
One is, middle schools kind of have an economy of scale in that with respect to staffing and other things. And so when you have a smaller middle school like that, you kind of run into limited options for some of the kids. And so I want to make sure that we're making sure that the students that go there still have all the same options that they have at a bigger school.
Number two, I'm really uncomfortable about modifying, I don't want to say closing, because I'm modifying at the current elementary school, because we know these elementary schools are a vital part of the community, and anytime you change that, it sends ripples through the community. So I'm really uncomfortable with making any kind of major change right now to converting a current school into just K3. From an education standpoint, I'm very uncomfortable with that. And then just also, I just would love to see kind of a more, I need to see more numbers about utilization. This is going to come up in part of my board update from CSBA, but one of the sessions I went to was talking, was about a whole person who comes in and does a whole property utilization, not management, but kind of looks at all your properties, looks at things you could sell off, look at things you could buy, look at things you could swap with a commercial property. And I'll talk to more about that. So, and this is a big thing. So I'm going to need more time before I vote on any one of these. But I'm definitely really uncomfortable with modifying any kind of elementary. And I want to make sure that the middle school kids at the smaller middle school have all the options that they'll have at other school. Otherwise, they're not going to go, because then we have a false economy where, you know, point of diminishing returns, where, yeah, we save some money here, but it costs twice as much to run the school because we don't have the scale. We still need a nurse that's going to work with elementary kids and middle school. We need two different types of counselors, because we have, you know, one's to deal with kinder or fourth graders, and one to deal with eighth graders, and they're way different. So we just kind of make sure that it might seem good now, but it might be false economy in the long run, and how to run the school. So I just want to need more information like that. And I think that just is going to come from digging in and looking at more information. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roth, for presenting an amazing presentation and all the details. We are going to move on to the next topic.
Can I say one thing?
We are already now short on time, so
I just wanted to.
Please be brief.
I just wanted to. I put in an agreement with you on one thing, and in the schools that I have been involved in, it is very difficult to have a good middle school program, as far as you know, being sure that they get the options of having all the electives and all the things that they have at the other middle schools, and the activities and things like that. So that would be a definite, you know, something that we would have, if we do go that way, that we would have to say within ourselves that we must continue to keep, you know, the schools all equal and the same, even if they're smaller.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Ron?
I just want to know, I'm not asking for
Microphone. Sorry.
I'm not asking for a decision to do it. What I'm looking for is direction on whether or not we should seek out to see if this is a viable process. In other words, we would next go to parents to say, is this something that you want? If we sit on our hands and not do something on this, the outcome will be, by de facto, it will de facto to the 10-year plan rather than the 3-year plan. And it will become more expensive. And let me tell you the reason why. One, it costs more to build a school 10 years from now than 3, one. Two, when all those houses get built at Crossroads West, we're going to have to house those kids in portables. So we're going to have to start buying $100,000, $150,000 portables per portable and house them somewhere for 7 years or whatever. So I'm not trying to force the hand, but I don't want this to die. I'm suggesting a process to get public input, because we obviously don't want to make a decision without the people of Crossroads saying whether or not they want it or not. So do we want to at least go to the next step where the facilities committee holds a public hearing out there to see if there's even an interest for this in Crossroads? Or do you want to bring it back to a future board meeting, discuss it again before we go to talk with parents and Crossroads to see if it's a viable option?
I think the getting parent input would be great. I'm not sure we have enough information at this time to kind of, because they're going to have a lot of questions, and to say we're not sure yet is not So I think what would be a great step moving forward is kind of developing out what that questionnaire would look like and the type of information we can present. And then when we feel that that's sufficient, then we can present it maybe sometime in the spring, or maybe, is that what you're looking at?
That's fine. So are you suggesting that the facilities committee, Jen and I work with Lizette then for a presentation? Obviously we're going to need curriculum in on this and all this, because I mean, it becomes I can't answer all the logistical the schools. I'm just trying to get you guys an option to build a school in 3 or 4 years rather than 10+ years. My expertise is not setting up a school,
right?
And
I mean,
how many administrators and nurses in that. That's their job.
So maybe would it be feasible to then maybe not now because we're in another type of situation, but maybe we can go and ask what their timeline, what your timeline would be like to kind of come up with a feasibility report for option 3. Maybe not now because we got a couple things going on, but maybe in a couple months.
I would say my feeling is that I think that we really need to get all our stuff together. So I would just say let's let Jen and George meet with Lizette and start looking at questions, looking at things that we can present, because George and I've built at least 6 schools here, and George has built at least 5, and it's a process. It's a long process. And if we fool around, the more houses are built, the more expensive the property becomes to buy. And when you're looking at buying property, you got to jump on it right away.
So there might be an option to say, well, we're going to buy property, but we're not going to do with it.
That's a good, that is something we would look at.
Well, the answer is.
But you got to go with middle school, or you got to go with.
Yeah, we have to tell them. We're going to have to tell the CFD how we're going to go. But if you can just give us permission for Jenna and Lizette and whatever other staff she has over the coming month or whenever it's convenient for staff to meet and build a plan. Then we can get to go ahead to at least go forward with a public hearing or some type of hearing to see if the people even want it. If not, you know, I can spend my retirement doing other things. You know?
All right, Mr. Frederickson, what do you think? Does that work with your current timeline and schedules?
Yeah, I can work with staff. Again, you're talking about 2 different concepts. You're talking about the building of the school and then the logistics of grade level spans.
Yeah,
so that is something that staff can study. There's a lot of research.
Yeah. So if we did this hybrid thing that Mr. Ross proposed, which is really great thinking, I just, you know, as an educator, I'm terrified to see 4th graders and 8th graders commingling, however pretty the fences are.
But we have to move fast.
Sure,
because
I understand that.
Because honestly, and I'm not lying to you, one time we were going to buy a piece of property, and they got wind that we wanted to buy it, and it was
it's public news now.
We backed out, and we actually went over and bought land in Tivoli. Okay. That's why we have the Tivoli school.
Okay.
Because we backed out.
Okay.
So just give staff time to be able to look at what that looks like. We can come back and give you an update on it.
Okay.
What we're doing, and it'll generate further discussion.
Okay.
And it may lead to the public forum and discussion.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like then the next step this time is Mr. Ferguson work with his team, and then Ms. Miyakawa and Mr. Ra, if they have any questions, they can run them past you or Ms. Aguilar and kind of not formally work together because but kind of work together.
Yeah, because again, it'll be more philosophical.
What I mean by informally, I mean like it's not a full-blown project yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
We understand we're not making a decision on anything.
Sure.
I was just looking for getting public input at some point.
Okay.
See if this is even viable.
Oh, so we'll look at, we'll look at what's going on, whether or not this is feasible, option 3 is feasible, and what are the issues there, long-term and short-term. And then we will have enough information to then go to the public to then get their feedback. How does that work for everybody? Okay, got some thumbs up. Okay. Great.
I just lived through the time when we put kids in the hallways and then
we're not going to do that.
And things like that.
Because we didn't have COVID. We got this. We got this. Okay. We're going to move on. Modernization and reimbursement of funds update. It's 5B. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. if you can pull up, Mark, the
Thank you.
information on that one. Yes, that's the one. Thank you very much. So to continue our discussion on facilities, this will also provide some additional information around funding. This is a status update on modernization projects which Sullivan has completed, and we have submitted applications to the state to receive reimbursement for these. So the first two that are listed here for Orchard and Sylvan, those were both submitted, those applications were both submitted to the state in 2018 and have been awaiting their turn in line, which you can see is it's a lengthy process. Orchard for 2.9 million and Sylvan for 2.9 million for a total of 5.8 million that is pending. And the good news is that we have received, I shared this a few weeks back in a Friday update to the board, that we have received an update from the state. We received one first November 30th saying that they were giving us our 60-day notification that they were going to be reviewing our application. And then just a few weeks ago, January 6th, we received the second notice saying that they would start looking at it within the next 30 days. So what does that mean? I'm talking to our facilities funding consultant, Ms. Mamie Dean, just indicate, based on that, she said, typically we would be looking at within the year, very possibly less, of actually receiving the reimbursement, assuming that it goes through the process, they review it. And as historically we have been funded on the applications that we have submitted, we would anticipate to actually receive that money, cash in the bank, within the next year, because it's a matter of them going through that. Once they've reviewed the application, everything is approved, then it's a matter of when they have the funds in the bank themselves to be able to send us the money, or whether the state has to issue bonds in order to reimburse us for this. So both of these applications are within what the state currently has authority to issue bonds for. So the state has, a certain amount of authority based on what the state voters statewide approved for the state to issue bonds and be able to reimburse schools for facilities. That's what Mr. Raw oftentimes referred to as receiving funding from the state that goes through that process. So those two projects are within that authority and are in that category, if you will, as what the state refers to as within their maximum bonding authority. The one down below that you'll see listed, USTAC, is not. That project happened after, and that application was submitted November of 2019 to the state. So you can see there I listed, that is beyond the current statewide bond authority. So meaning, they even when they do issue all the bonds that the state can, there would not be enough funding to reimburse us for this. That is the current status of this. If at some point in time there was another bond, if that's what the state voters approved, then this potentially could be on that. So the state does receive the application and says, we receive it, we acknowledge we have it, it's on the list, but we don't have enough bonding capacity at this point for it. So that's what it is at. The time frame on that to receive the funds, as I noted, then would be unknown depending on what happens. In the January governor's proposal that we just saw a few weeks ago, the governor did propose funding applications that are beyond the state bonding authority with general fund dollars, something that is not been seen, I think, ever, very rarely. So he is, the administration is looking at maybe different ways to fund schools in California. And in the meantime is proposing funding, pulling some money from general fund to be able to reimburse some of these. They know there's a whole list of projects that are beyond the current authority. So if that in fact was to get approved, we'll find out when they actually pass the state budget in June, then USDAC has a very good chance of being funded from that allocation out of the general fund, because we are more towards the top of the list, and he did allocate a healthy amount of funding at the state level for those applications. So that's just an update on where we are with both of those.
Thank you so much. Lindsay, you pointed up. I thought you pointed up. These glasses and mask. Okay. At what percentage are they funding us? What percentage is this?
These amounts, this is what we would be potentially be receiving from the state. So the 2.9 million.
Right, but what percentage? I mean, the state.
Oh,
you know, they don't pay full funding. They went to 80, and then they went to 50, and
they're typically 50-50 for the mod, but I'd have to go back and confirm that amount. I'm not. That's just going off of what's typical.
So we're still out quite a bit of money, even though even if we get the money, we're still half out, right?
It was yes, it was right around that. About half. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and then is there any chance that USAC might get a portion of that sooner, or they only do it in lump? And how do they fund us? Do they lump it together, or do they give it to us in increments?
As far as I know, it would just be one lump sum. I don't think they do it in increments. Really, it's a matter of one, if the governor's proposal does pass and that money gets allocated towards these applications that are waiting in line, and two, when they get to this, because you can see they're working on 2018 right now, and this is a year later that we submitted. So depending on what speed they move, because that will vary, you know, depending on the workload and whatnot. It's hard to say, you know, at what speed they're currently moving. We know that they have staffed the office more, so they are processing applications sooner. But I mean, I would venture to guess, you know, at least another 2 years out, because if the one that's waiting to be reviewed within 30 days is a year out, I would say the one that we, you know, sent in a year later is probably at least another year after that. Okay. But that's just a total guesstimate. That is not a.
I just wondered if they had upped their funding percentage, and obviously they haven't. So
no.
Okay, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get a boost in that percentage and get a little bit more money on their stuff. Would we have to apply for it though? If they should say this just randomly, if the state decided to give us, instead of 50%, say 70%, would we have to apply for that extra 20, or would they give it to us automatically?
I think it would depend on, you know, if they were to increase that, I'm sure that there would be language around what those requirements would be. So we would just have to wait and see. I don't believe that even with that amount, there's enough to fund everything that's on the list. So the likelihood of them, you know, even wanting to fund at a higher rate, if they don't have enough to fund everything on the list, is probably not too likely.
So we go back in and we submit it, if they jump up to.
I mean, we could if we met the requirements of whatever that was, you know, passed at the time. We would definitely give it our best shot. That's for sure.
Go for it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to full day transitional kindergarten, TK, and facilities discussion.
I had a question. Sorry, my hand was up.
My apologies. I didn't see your little hand.
That's okay. That's all right. I ignore George's all the time too. It's all good. I just really quickly, can you tell me what we are doing with that money that's coming back to us? I know some of it we owe back. We are paying ourselves back because we borrowed from the general fund. I think that was more primarily USDAC. I can't remember about Sherwood and Orchard. Where do those monies go if and when we get reimbursed?
So those would go back into our facilities fund for us to look at and determine, other than USDAC, as you mentioned, that we specified some amounts of loans and funding that we took from other funds that we could put those back into those other funds. We would look at, you know, what facilities priorities do we have, which will lead into our next discussion, in terms of what can we do with this funding that we have now. And
okay.
we can come up with plenty of ideas.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lizette.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? All right. Now we're going to move on to full day traditional to kindergarten TK and kindergarten facilities discussion. So as we look at facility needs, we've been having, you saw the presentation that we brought to you at the last board meeting on just the universal transitional kindergarten and the implementation of that and the phase in. So obviously, as we look at bringing in really a whole new grade of students into the district and phasing that in, fortunately, over a 4-year period, the hope is that will bring us more students in. And really, as we've been talking about the declining enrollment, I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at bringing in additional students to the district. But we obviously need to look at where are these students going to go as we look at not only transitional kindergarten, but we had the discussion on full day kindergarten, which would be then a full day kindergarten and a full day TK program. So in our presentation to you at the last board meeting, we talked about this coming up school year, the 22-23 year, and projecting about 120 students possibly eligible. We'll have to see how many students actually enroll and decide to come to, first of all, decide to attend TK and then decide to come to TK at Sylvan. But then we need to look at, and when we talked about looking at facilities for that as well as full day K, we indicated that in our walks and seeing the available spaces, we could make that work with what we currently have. But then we need to look at what happens after next year in the 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26 and beyond school years. So following the same rationale of just projecting how many additional students we could have in those outer years, you see the timeline there. That's the additional birthdays for students, first being February 3rd, April 2nd, and that 23-24 year. Another possible 117 students in that year. In the 24-25 year from April to June, another 116 potential students, and then 25-26, June 3rd to September 1st, another 200 students potentially. So if you look at those 3 years beyond next year, from 23-24 to 25-26, we're talking about another potential 438 students being added into the district over those years. And if we look at how many classrooms that would be of transitional kindergarten based on 20 students to a classroom, then we would potentially be looking at needing 22 more classrooms to house these students over the next 3 years beyond, and I'm talking beyond next year, beyond 22-23. So how will we do that? One, by potentially down the road, maybe building a school, but that's still, as Mr. Raw talked about, 3 years down the road. And in the meantime, just the year after next, we need to look at making space for another 117. We really need to look at, in the meantime, some options for portables at our schools where we have space and ability to do that, which we do believe we know we have the schools currently where, one, there's space, and or two, there has been an existing portable that is no longer there. So there may even already be some infrastructure. So, but we just need to begin that work of just looking at what the possibilities are for those portables and seeing where we would be getting funding from, which the previous discussion we just had, we are anticipating receiving funding within the next year, thankfully, that could really help fund some of these needs. So let me just see if I missed anything else that I wanted to mention.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is we have had some preliminary discussion with Mimi Dean also on there is funding out there, state funding specifically for TK expansion. It based on the guidelines that we discussed, one of them being the unduplicated pupil percentage. We would not likely be at the top of the list when it comes to rankings, because that is a big consideration. However, that doesn't mean that, you know, we should not apply. Any opportunity we have to apply for some funds where we feel we have a good, you know, chance of successfully getting those, we will definitely seek that. So we would work with her. We could work with her more on doing that, you know, with your direction on that. So there is funding for construction at a 50-50 state share district funding percentage, and or potentially retrofits at a 60-40 state versus district the funding portion. And there's no funding for portables, but that doesn't mean that if you may have portables that you then move your older students into, you couldn't retrofit some of your current existing facilities for the younger students to go into. So that is some of the discussion preliminarily that we had with her. Of course, when you do that, there's all kinds of requirements on square footage, restrooms, et cetera, when you go through the state funding process. So we'd have to work through that. But I think regardless of that, in the meantime, we need to start working on a plan for where we would house these students, because 23-24 is a little bit more than a year away. And in talking to the architects, getting a portable, going through the process from start to finish could easily take a year, potentially a little bit longer, depending on the supply for portables. So we need to begin having those discussions, and at least maybe at the next board meeting, if I can get direction on beginning that process with architect services to start looking at planning that out. I think that's something that we need to look at as we look at these UTK needs for facilities.
All right, I'm going to go first this time. I like the idea. I think that's a fun idea to move some bigger kids into the portables and then use the retrofitting. And you said it was 60-40, is 60% state is paying and 40% the district? Is that the way the 60-40 goes?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, I like that idea. And even how does the 50-50 is you build something new?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's probably that is going to be a much longer process.
Yeah.
But
Okay. And I also
not
like
to
the
mention
idea that
costly.
you putting, because portables are so much better now than what they used to be even just 5 years ago. I mean, they really are neat. They are fully functioning classrooms. So that's great. All right. So we'll go backwards. Ms. Tolcott?
I just have one question. Are we planning on putting TK on every site, or every elementary site?
I don't believe we have made a final determination on that. That would be the ideal. And I'm looking at Mr. Frederickson, he's shaking his head. So that would be the ideal. We don't know if that will be, we'll be able to do that for this coming year. I would anticipate that in the long run, definitely that would be the plan. At what point, you know, we do that, I'm not sure.
That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miyakawa.
Thank you. I realized that tonight's agenda item was strictly facilities, so I appreciate that update. That's something that we specifically asked for more information on that last meeting. I need to know from what this discussion looks like from here on out. For example, I know it was mentioned, I think the Friday update, that you'll be bringing this to the board, either the first meeting in February or the second one. It was still undetermined, I think, from what I read, in terms of getting approval for full day K. But there's still a lot of things that I'm not comfortable with. So what I'm asking it, so what my question is if we say, yes, you can go ahead and move forward on, the initial steps of establishing a full day kindergarten in our district, that's also pending, this committee of teachers that you're going to put together, parent input, that sort of thing. But is that it as far as what the board, concerns we might have about what it looks like, how it's stacking up? And I guess what further discussion will we have if at the next board meeting you need to hear a yay or nay from us, and yet we don't know all the moving pieces and what this is going to look like?
The old delay process. Yes, well, so what we're going to attempt to do prior to this coming board meeting is to have a dialogue with our labor partners. We've got that set up this week so we can discuss that with them. Also, Dr. Fong is going to be communicating with the kindergarten staff prior to that meeting. She had also scheduled meetings on the 2nd, which is after the board meeting. So what we can do at this upcoming meeting is present to you feedback from those communications that we've had, plus what we've talked about tonight as far as facilities. If the board is not feeling comfortable on the 1st to take action, we can delay it to the 22nd. The only challenge we're facing with that is we started the kindergarten registration process. We've had quite a few parents calling and inquiring about, well, I'm waiting to hear, are we gonna, before I register, or are we gonna go to full day? So we don't want to lose families that, may go register somewhere else. So there is a timeline with this, but if the board is not comfortable on the 1st, we will seek to do further research, until the next board meeting on the 22nd. And then if it gets past the 22nd, we may want to just delay it for a year if there's too much uncertainty. Because I think once you get past the 22nd of February, parents are waiting. They're eager to register students. So that facility-wise, that was what we were hoping tonight, was anything related to facilities. Again, with those universal TK kids, those are projections. So again, what would be, I would think, be curious for the board to see is, so we project 120 for next year. We need to start the work on looking at, housing the next round. But if we see that, no, we didn't have 120 materialized, we only had 80, we can start to get a clearer picture of that. But we need to start the work. I attended an state AXA superintendent's meeting last week, and the big discussion all over the state is there's a great concern about how we're going to house and make this universal TK work. So there is further discussion at the state level that you're going to have to provide some funding because it's a mandated program. We are required to provide it. So I would anticipate more news coming for facilities. But I think if we can start the work with Mimi Dean and start looking at those applications, it'd be worthwhile. Because you got to get in line for those, even though it's a point system. So they do base part of the application on what your unduplicated count is, and there's districts with higher numbers. They would, they would be ahead of us, but there may be money.
Ms. Miyakawa, what information do you need is there any information that we could get you before the 1st where you can make a decision? Or
okay, so here's my biggest hang up right now is TK full day. That for me is a big hitch point for me. And TK is registering now along with kindergarten, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess just initially, are you getting the same questions about, because that honestly took me by surprise. It was a question I just happened to ask. at the last board meeting, having no idea that they're supposed to mirror each other. And so even just looking up, you know, since last boarding and this meeting, what I found on edsource.org says that universal TK like kindergarten is a local choice of full day or part day. And then it said something that I don't understand. However, the state's new expanded learning opportunities program requires that local LEAs offer a 9-hour school day, including before and after school class services. I don't know what that part means. But I talked to another person and they said they thought that Oakdale was doing half day TK, full day kinder. So I reached out to a bunch, I think 15 of my local moms who have kids this age to kind of get just general feedback. I submitted that feedback to Dr. Fong just an hour before the meeting, maybe just so she could see it, because I forgot this was just facilities. Anyway, so the TK part for me is the real hang up for me. For the most part, full day kindergarten, kind of the makeup of it, I have some questions and concerns. I'm happy to sit down with Dr. Fong and share concerns, but I think as a board, we have to have an idea of what we want, you know, in terms of policy or whatever, what our kindergarten and TK program looks like, how long that has to be. I think we have to have a say in that. And so that's the big sticking point for me.
Well, we'll research that further, and we can even just send emails to the board just to give you updates on it as well. But again, like I said, if we get to the first and you don't feel like we processed it enough,
It's kind of a quick push.
Yeah, and I'll submit very specific questions. I think I just submitted 1 or 2 with the feedback because that's all I had time by the time I got all the feedback from these moms. So I'll submit some very specific questions that I have or concerns to both you and Dr. Fong. That way that you can see about those and address those at the first or in an Friday update, however you want to handle it.
very good.
Great, thank you. Mr. Arnold?
I'll go with the facility thing. You know, and I know we went on a divergent path here, and I'm on your team with on the TK. The piece of the puzzle though that is concerning to me, I'm not sure I'm willing to sacrifice all day kindergarten because of that. So I really don't want to put it off. So hopefully we can find a solution that makes the board happy, because this is just so frustrating to me, because I know this is a political thing. It has nothing to do with education, and it's very frustrating, but I don't want to cut my nose off in spite of something. Anyway, I don't know, there's something like that. Yeah, thank you. So I don't want to kill kindergarten this year over that thing. I hope we're able to find a solution though for you, Mrs. Miyakawa, really, your TK, because I'm on board with you on that. But as for facilities, I would just like to work close with you on the facilities. Your number looks like 558 on your sheet. Is 558 the total TK kindergarten number, or is that just a TK? That's the TK number is 558, right?
That is an additional TK students that will be generated over the next 4 years, including next year, the 22-23 year.
So
yes.
558. How many, if we went all day kindergarten, how many FTEs, you know what I'm saying to you? Mm-hmm. Are we getting on a kindergarten? Because right now a kindergartner is a 0.5 FTE. And so if we went all day, it basically, for lack of a better, it doubles the number of seats needed in the class, because they're half. You follow what I'm saying? Or am I saying it backwards? Dee Dee's looking at me. Am I making sense, Dee Dee?
Yeah, so the kindergarten teachers, you're talking about the kids half day.
I'm looking for facilities. So to me, I'm looking at seats. I'm letting you guys worry about how to educate kindergartners. I'm looking about, am I going to give a seat to them and heat them and condition them? And that's a George Raw thing.
Because we need extra space to put the extra bodies.
You got it, sister. And so with that in mind, how many additional seats am I going to need by going to full kindergarten?
I have to go back and look at our presentation, but we did look at I believe it was 13 classrooms. I'm looking at Dr. Fong, see if she remembers off the top of her head. I believe it was 13 additional classrooms in order to be able to.
20, that's 260. I understand that, but we're needing twice the space.
Absolutely, yes.
We need twice the space that
Correct.
we currently have. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering how many additional. Just tell me how many kindergartners, and I'll double. That will give me the additional seats I need. How many kindergartens do we have in this district?
So about 260.
260. So do we have about, which should be somewhere right around 260? Is that how many kindergartens we have in the district?
No, because when we pull that.
So you didn't count it like that then?
No, we only looked at not every single, some kindergarten teachers already have their own classroom, some share.
Got it. Okay, so 260.
Yes.
All right, and we are deficient 400. I mean, we're down 400 kids from 2 years ago. So that gives me 140 plus the 580. Or my off the there. So I'm at 400. So I need the extra for 400 kids in the next 4 years. It's just I'm doing the math in my head. So yeah, we're going to need quite a few new classrooms that we currently did not have. I'm in agreement with you, and you're saying 22. So that looks about right to me. About 20 some classrooms, which will likely. Probably be portables to plug your ears over there. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but I just don't know if we're going to be able to get the finances. You made a great idea of doing the swap, but financially I was playing the numbers in my head and I'm not sure they'll crunch. They're not going to crunch. So I think we're going to be forced to do the most economical, but I'm willing to look at it on paper. But I'm happy to help in whatever way in getting these classrooms as fast as possible. I'm looking for something to do. You know,
I am happy to take your help.
I'm looking for something to do, not to irritate you, because if irritate, I'll go and play pinball. So
Okay,
No,
thank you so much, Mr. Ross. So
I welcome your help and expertise.
thank you, Miss Lindsay.
Yes, okay. I've been running the same numbers he's running as far as kindergarten. We know they have to have a certain kind of number of bathrooms, which means we can't put them in portables unless we have little people portables. And we also haven't taken into consideration that we're going to be multiplying the number of kids that come to school in the mornings, not only at this kindergarten, but TK on our buses. So we need to look at that number as well, because then you got to look at yard duties, because you're going to have more kids on the campus at one time. So you're going to need yard duties. So we've got a lot of money that we're going to be putting out to accommodate a transitional kindergarten all day. I personally, this is Ocala. I'm not leaning toward that at all. I think that the fact that kindergarten isn't even a mandatory class in the state of California. And then we are being told that we need to have a transitional kindergarten all day too. They're not giving us the money to take care of these kids. They're not giving us the money to build the sites. So the one thing that nobody's going to like, and I'm going to throw this out there because it looks like we're going to be kind of in a hurt for about 4 years, is that we look, if we should have to do, and we are mandated to do this, that we look at either leasing a site that we could put all the TKs and Ks in, and they would have their own campus, their own bathrooms, they would be in a safe environment, and it would give us time to figure out what we're going to do with them at each individual sites, even if it means that we would have to go in and build different kind of bathrooms or something, whatever we would have to do. That would give us time to meet the needs of the community. Now, I know people don't like that. They're not going to like that. But throwing out some good stuff. The good stuff is they are in a safe environment. They're going to be all knowing each other, little types together. And if we don't go with a full day transitional kindergarten or transitional, we could possibly go with an AM PM, which would save us a little bit of money, and it would possibly still meet the requirements of the state, which is that we are offering full day transitional kindergarten to our students. They just have a choice of whether they want to come half a day in the morning or half a day in the afternoon. So that's just some thoughts I have on it, and but I would like some figures on how many of those kids you think we're going to be on buses? How many of those kids you think we're going to, need extra teachers in the classroom with? Because are we going to have to put more than 20 in? Because when they're 22, then we have to have another teacher in there. How many of those kids are we going to have for yard duties to, be out there with them at that time? Eating facilities, cafeterias, and all that kind of stuff. So I know it's a lot, and I think it's almost overwhelming for you guys. I really do. I feel for you. So all right. Anyway, that's been what's running through my mind. So excellent. And you're welcome that I have one of those brain crazies tonight.
Thank you so much. So what I'm also hearing is from the board is that need more information, might be ready to vote on this, need a little more information, particularly with facilities as well as curriculum. We also need more information with respect to if we do all day kinder, do we have to do all day TK? Because if Oakdale's not doing it, I read rumors fly, so I don't know. And then I'm with Mr. Ra. I'm not ready to throw, I want to see all day kindergarten, and and if it means that we also have to do all day TK, I trust the teachers are going to do an engaging program that will be mindful of where the students are in their development. That will be a really positive experience, and that includes naps and playtimes and finger painting and chasing butterflies and maybe learning how to hold a pencil. Right on, great. So the correct way, or anyway, I don't know. Okay, all right, thank you so much. We are going to move on. I do apologize, we have gone over. I definitely underestimated, this is my fault. We're going to do board reports. We'll start with Ms. Miyakawa.
Okay, mine's super brief. So I focused my experience around two different things. One was student advisory council, since that's something that I've been working with the middle school teachers and putting together and kind of creating our version of what that might look like. And we'll have a second or third meeting tomorrow where we kind of finalize some things. So that went well. The other issue that I attended several classes on was advocacy, which was super helpful for me in terms of knowing how to be that connection between our constituents and our population and those who, how we inform and connect those two groups for those who actually make policy decisions. And we've seen the importance of that this year, as we've had every meeting for the last 6 or 7 or so meetings, people come and advocate for decisions that are really made in Sacramento. So I guess what I would love to see, and I learned a lot, and I am grateful for Ms. Harvey for kind of pushing us in that direction, because that is one of our main 3 roles is advocacy. What I would love to see and see if there's any other interest is having either some sort of I don't know that I want to throw it onto a board meeting because they're already long enough, but if we just had a little study session with our PACER, which I had never even heard of that term until I went to a class, which is essentially our public affairs representative in our area, someone from CSBA, and can maybe walk us through the steps of how we can advocate for policy that directly affects us or our families, and how we can guide our parents and families who come to us with concerns, how we can guide them to the right steps to make sure that informed decisions are being made in Sacramento. And let me just give you a case in point. I read just today that there's 2 bills now on being proposed, and I think they're both in the Senate, but I don't get me wrong. Both had to do with vaccine. One had to do with kids 12 and older being able to vaccinate without parental consent, and the other one had to do with rolling out they were taking away the personal belief exemption for the vaccine. So both of those have to do with things that have been up close and personal with our families in the district. And so I would love for that as just an example of, okay, we have these two legislations in place. Now, what do we do, and what can we help our stakeholders do to provide feedback and data, and how this is going to impact us as a district, and as well as the concerns that they have. So if we could have some sort of little study session as a board on advocacy and how we streamline that, how we educate on that, that's something that I haven't had since high school government class. So there's a lot that I don't understand in terms of how the process, and who's on what committee, and who do you actually talk to that's going to make a difference, and that kind of thing I think would be super helpful for us in our role as advocates.
Thank you, Ms. Biancola. Do you have anything additionally?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. All right. Ms. Lindsay has a comment, and then we'll move on to Ms. Talcott.
It was just for you, Jennifer. I think that I serve with the PACER all the time, Stephen, and I think what we wanted to do is not to have a PACER, but maybe have somebody from the Ledge Action Committee come in if we want something like that, because he's more involved in just kind of keeping all the school districts informed of what's kind of taking place in CSBA, not so much as what's happening at the state level. So I think we would be able to, I'm going to be meeting with him here in just a little bit. So we might be able to get a person from the Ledge Action Committee to come to us and talk to us a little bit about the legislative process and what we can do.
That would be great, Cindy. That would be great if you can recommend somebody. And honestly, for me, this one's kind of the sooner the better, in terms of just because we have some hot things on the docket right now. And I would really like to understand the process better, as well as help our stakeholders know where to really direct their passionate energy.
And you know what, I really appreciate you doing this, because for years I've been your representative at the Capitol, and I have really wanted our board to support a lot of legislation that has come down that we haven't supported. So I would like the board to be educated in that area too. It's really important.
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. Ms. Talcott.
I'd like to first thank the district for letting us go. It was an amazing opportunity, and the bonding and all the information I received was actually wonderful. I loved our first keynote speaker, Dr. Victor Rios. He really set the tone of seeing each student's potential, how they can give to the district, no matter what baggage they bring with them. I went to a smattering of everything, just emotional health, mental health, food health. I went to budgeting, school funding 101, where I learned a lot of what the acronyms and how the budgeting decisions were made. And it was kind of one of those eye-opening things of how much I don't know. So I'm excited if we're able to go back again and kind of streamline where I go. The only class that I wasn't super thrilled with was Maslow over Bloom, because it was a lot of links to different classes that we could take. And a lot of them I'd already heard. So improving student achievement without spending extra money, and how you align your budget with your priorities. And overall, it was just a very positive experience. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Any comments? All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. My last thing was why I went to a president's meeting. It was how to navigate change, or how to manage navigating change. Looking at norms and protocols and best practices. responding to constituents using the 4 R's. Budgets, they were almost giddy. And it's funny to see budget people giddy from the state. I hadn't seen that before. There's a couple of innovators with respect to mental health. The superintendent of Stanislaus came up with a really innovative check-in policy app. Actually, it's on the policy, it's app. There's also one called Care Solace, and this is amazing, and I still don't have enough information. It's a warm handoff, so if you're having a mental health crisis, there's a long lag time between asking for help and getting the help. And this is like it's kind of like an Uber for or Uber Eats. You know, you order what you need, and then it's like a warm handoff 72 hours later. So check that out if you guys have a chance. It's amazing. And then lastly, it's the facilities. I went to a couple of facilities because I knew we were covering a couple of things, and it sounds like there's some amazing consultants out there. I know looking at a consultant sometimes it's like, but sometimes if you look at the cost benefit analysis, they sometimes can save you money in the long run. There's consultants that navigate your cell phone tower contracts. There are consultants out there who can look at leveraging the property that you have, but you're not using as efficiently, and switching it with property that you need. So for instance, like a district office, we're growing out of it. You could switch that with an office building, and then the cost to the district is almost nothing. And so there's a lot of amazing consultants like that. I said the names of 2 of the most impressive ones to Ms. Aguilar and Mr. Frederickson, and I know they're in the process of looking up on that, but that might be something that we as a board might want to look at. Since we have so many facility things coming on, we have TK, we have K, we have this school, we have a couple sites. And so just something that I'm hoping that we get the opportunity to look at. I'm seeing some nods, so I think some type of contact's been made or working on it. And so thank you so much. It really was a positive experience, a lot of learning. And Ms. Miyakawa, to your point, I'm always an advocate for our district, so I love the fact that you're out there too. It sounds like we have other board members. Another great thing is if there's anything that goes on in your classroom or at your school and you think that would be really cool to invite somebody, they love that. We've had people come to our schools, and so if there's anyone out there listening, and you see something great coming up, let us know, and then we can get in contact with their people, and usually someone will show up, and they always love it. So thank you so much, and that concludes our meeting. Oh, sorry, my bad. We have to approve the purchase of stage structure equipment for USTAC Middle School. Motion's been made by Ms. Lindsay. Second by Mr. Rahm. Roll call vote.
Board Member Roth. Board Member Lindsay.
Aye.
Board Member Talcott.
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa.
Aye.
Board President Harvey.
Aye, the motion carries. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.